Well, welcome everyone. My name is Rick Green, and co-host for this evening will also be Jane Boys. Thank you, Jane, for assisting. On behalf of the Sustainable Resource Committee for the Greater Snoqualmie Valley, we'd like to welcome everyone. This committee, the Sustainable Resource Committee, was really formed some years ago, really with the mission of striving to build relationships among individuals and groups of people, um, really surrounding the themes of environment and agriculture, and helping to support and connect farmers and educators from both the academic realm and indigenous cultures, and really just striving to build a stronger sense of community while at the same time being able to appreciate all of the hard work and diligence of the farmers and those who serve in the agricultural community as well as in the environmental sustainability community of the Snoqualmie Valley. So welcome everyone. This evening we have two wonderful speakers. We have Masra Clamoungou from the Sammamish Valley, and we have Jeremy Houston from the Snoqualmie Valley. And we've invited them to to tell their story of how they, came into the field of agriculture, um, and uh, and to maybe share some of their methods of farming and their love for farming and what brought them into serving in this way. And so we will have two talks. Masra, we'll have you go first. And so I would like to just take a moment to introduce Masra. Masra was a student of sustainable agriculture with interest in international relations and sustainable food systems. And now, currently, he is the manager of the Small Axe Farm, a nonprofit farm program of the Black Farmers Collective. Small Axe sits on a 4-acre plot of land in the Sammamish Valley. It has a variety of mixed vegetables that the farm produces, and it's sold at markets in Seattle, as well as supporting several mutual aid groups and other food distribution systems in the area. Masra was born and raised in the Rainier Valley in the neighborhood of South Seattle, and he studied sustainable agriculture at Sterling College in Kentucky. So, welcome, Masra, for joining us this evening, and please, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Rick, for that great introduction. Yeah, as Rick was saying, my name is Masra Clamoungou. Where do I start in my farming journey? I guess I think I get to start with how I got into farming a little bit. Rick covered a lot of it there, but I'll preface this with saying I guess I never don't have family in farming or never had like a background being interested in farming growing up in Seattle here. Obviously, didn't have a connection to a lot of farms. I grew up in Seattle in the city, so not a big connection to the rural areas or any agricultural ways of living, so to speak. But to go over it really briefly, I stumbled upon agriculture really just by happenstance. So I was going to attending school at Seattle Central Community College, where they had a very short series of programs in sustainable agriculture. And I had some free credits and eventually had some free elective credits that I needed to fill in. Wound up signing up for a few of those classes and really enjoyed those experiences there. And then around the same time, I got involved with a program called Seattle Youth Garden Works through formerly Seattle Tilth, now known as Tilth Alliance, where I got to sort of experience farm work and sort of growing vegetables on a farm on a larger farm scale than a garden, smaller than like a big farm, but sort of fell in love with that work too, out there and just being mostly just the physical aspect of it, being sort of in touch with the soil, in touch with my own body, and sort of seeing a tangible result from the work that I put in, along with my fellow farmers out there. And yeah, that's how I quickly got into farming. And then it was, yeah, just a series of serendipitous connections from there that led me to where I am right now. After Seattle Central, I took a few years finishing off just my regular class credits you needed to fulfill a transfer degree. Eventually heard about the Sterling College. They were doing a really unique program called the Wendellberry Farming Program. Um, Really focused on graduating farmers without student loan debt. So it was a really awesome and really unique program where it was basically free for the small cohort that they selected. And yeah, got into that program and really enjoyed my time in Kentucky, being exposed to a really different type of agriculture than what I had been seeing up here and pretty much in Seattle and sort of in Western Washington. Just I was farming in Seattle on an urban farm on the UW campus, and then a little bit up in the same valley where I'm at right now, in the Sammamish Valley, just outside of Woodinville. Really focused on small vegetable production, on a smaller human scale, market garden type systems. As opposed to out in Kentucky, it was a lot of grass and pasture based systems, really focusing on animal husbandry and sort of livestock and pasture management and sort of property management on hundreds of acres as opposed to like maximum 10 acres where I was used to out here, even fractions of acres. Yeah. And yeah, that's the quick and I guess the maybe a little bit long journey of how I got to where I am right now. Like Rick was saying, I work for the Black Farmers Collective. Here in my capacity as my own farm for my own farm business with Coyote Run Farm, which will be the operation I'll be starting this year and in my first year of operation, growing mixed vegetables on that small scale. And I guess I can dive into a little bit more now about my practices and sort of how what informs my thinking about farming and operations on farming. And yeah, feel free if anybody has any questions or pop in to want to, happy to answer those. But I have a few notes that I've just sort of just came up with, but I'll try to preface it with like back when I was in Seattle Central, I'd say the class that really took or sparked my interest was a class called agroecology, which is not really a new field anymore, but it's a field of it's sort of just it brings together those two words of agriculture and ecology. So viewing the farm as an ecological system. Anyway, that was something that really hooked me in in that first class there. And so I would say that a lot of my farming practices are coming from that lens of agroecology, which takes into a whole bunch. It's basically like a holistic context of the things that go into agriculture, not only like the biological and chemical and mineral systems, but also like the human systems and socioeconomic and cultural systems as well, taking those into account, the wellness of the farmer and the wellness of like where you're selling your product, selling your produce and selling the food, or not necessarily selling it, but distributing it in different ways. But yeah, long story that agroecology is, I say, a lens I come to farming with. Um, and with that, to get into the nitty gritty of it all, I guess I would say that one of the I guess there's not these aren't specific practices, but these are also further lenses from that, which is looking at the types of scale of agriculture that I'll be engaging in with Coyote Run Farm is be sort of like a very small scale. I'm on a quarter acre of land, total land, not just growing space. But and so in that space, I'll be using like a human scale system, which is very on that smaller scale. So a human can operate it. You're not really relying on tractors or tractor machinery to govern your system, your bed space, and such like that, and how you cultivate and manage weeds. And so to do that, we use a lot of human power, as would imply from the name, as well as um, a smaller form of tractor. We have a what's called a walking tractor, and it's just a two-wheel tractor that you walk behind like a mower, and you can have a variety of different implements that you use it to mow whatever crop residue or whatever grass or brush there is on top of the soil, or and then also it has a very variety of different soil working implements like plows, tillers, harrows, etc. Yeah, and in addition to that human scale, I'm also thinking and hopefully planning to do a little tractor scale as well for my little plot, just to uh think of how do I describe this as like some of the agroecological lens also takes about like looks into in my perspective looks into like the wellness of the farmer as well. So it'll be just me pretty much doing a lot of the labor on the land. So that's a lot of work. I don't know if y'all garden, you know, it's a lot of work. It's like weeding and doing the physical labor of farming, transplanting, all that stuff. And so that's a lot of the reason why mechanization and tractors have been utilized in the past is to limit that sort of physical output that the farmer needs to have. And so it's like, yeah, it's a different perspective, I guess. I don't know. And so I came across a really old, small garden tractor, this last year, old 1970s Kubota. So I'm hoping to be able to, use that tractor and sort of develop an additional system that's more of a tractor scale, but in addition to that human scale system as well. And yeah, I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense here, but that's that. Uh, and in addition to that, I'll just stop talking about all the skill stuff. But in addition to those types of practices and that sort of lens I come to it, we use a lot of uh, practices that really focus on soil health and again the health of the whole agroecological system. So I use a lot of cover crops, and intend to keep on using that in my rotation. So over the winter and during the growing season, probably as well, we'll have a cover crop that's planted that just grows to pretty much hold the fallow space in the soil. So it's not just bare soil or a bunch of weed species that we don't want that are covering it. So yeah. So over the winter, we'll have like an annual grass or that can take the winter temperatures, mixed in with a couple of different other species. A common a common mix that I hear that I've came up, with also with other farms in this region is a rye vetch mix. So it's ryegrass and then vetch, which is a legume, in the pea family, has that biological relationship with rhizobium bacteria, which is able to fix atmospheric nitrogen and sort of put it back into the soil. So you're nourishing the soil back as well. But yeah, anyway, long story short, cover cropping and weed management. We sort of just we look at it with different or we use different techniques. Obviously, the mechanical cultivation, with our human scale, we use a bunch of hose and hand pulling weeds. Hopefully, we don't have to do too much hand pulling if we focus on using the hose at the right time, to really just eliminate the weeds at their weakest stage. So when you hit them once, they'll no longer they'll die. um, and yeah, and then in addition to like hand weeding and I guess weed management in general, I will also be using a bunch of tarps and landscape fabric to sort of hopefully eliminate weeding totally. It's just because weeding is a big labor output. Thinking of it from a business perspective, you spend hours and hours and hours weeding. It's not gonna when you sell the produce at the end, it sometimes it won't balance out. And so, and I use that specifically on the farm I'm at right now because at Small X Farm that's managed by Black Farmers Collective, it's a fairly new field. We've came out we've been on there since this will be our fourth season going there. And before we were there, it was just a fallow field, I think for 7 or maybe 10 years before that. So weeds had been growing and dying and setting seed each season. So there's really a high weed pressure. So lots of dormant weed seeds in the soil. And once it's been tilled up, they just they sprout and then they grow as they do because they're very adapted to that situation, and it becomes unmanageable and kind of like scary once you see a bed of just a freshly tilled bed. After a few weeks, it turns into a mat of green. But yeah, so
For sure.
to manage that, we use a bunch of tarps to so we don't have to weed at all, hopefully. Yeah, and sort of in addition to that landscape fabric, well, I guess what I was thinking about before with the landscape fabric is would you put landscape fabric over a bed, over the growing space, and either burn or cut holes into that fabric so we just have a spot to put the plant in. And that's one form of tarping that I will engage in this season. Um, Also, a practice that I've learned about in these past few years is using a big tarps, like 50 by 100 foot tarps, known as silage tarps, which are just 6 mil plastic with a black and a white side, and you cover the soil with that. You can, and that allows during the growing season. It's a process. I think it's called occultation, which allows once you put the tarp over a field or a bed or something, it's a really the environment under the tarp becomes really hot, and then some it can be moist if it's watered before, if it's rained, and then that's a prime what is it prime conditions for seeds to germinate and start to grow. But once if they're blocked out from the sun and covered by that super hot heat, they'll also die pretty quickly after that. So that's one form of weed management that we also use at the farm is we'll cover up a portion of the field and then allow the weed seeds to germinate and then allow the weeds to eventually die after that. And then we'll have a nice, hopefully full, what is it, bare pot of soil that we can work up and eventually plant into. Yeah. And then if there are there any questions yet so far, I don't know, and any clarifications I can provide. I know I might be talking a little bit fast. Yes, I think I saw
I
Donna
wanted
has
to
a
know
hand, and
the
then
address of your Coyote Run farm.
yeah, the address.
Are you going to have customers come to it, or are you going to not have customers come to it?
Probably not in this first year. I'll be
Okay.
just focusing on just a couple of different contracts I have with the restaurant, and then a couple of different food banks that I'll be just delivering out to them. But not opposed to it. If anybody wants to come out and buy stuff, that's always good too.
Okay. Well, yeah, then maybe I would like the address then, if you want
Okay, yeah,
to visitors.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, I can. I'll hopefully pass on my contact information to someone organizing
Good.
this maybe, and then they can distribute that out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Address with appointment, please. Don't just stop by. Because I might not be there. I live in Seattle here too, so I'm not always at the farm. Um, I think Donna had your hand up.
Earl and I can attest to that. You didn't expect us to drive up
Mhm.
behind you.
Yeah, it was
Behind
opportune time. Right when I got in there too. Y'all were right behind me.
It was opportune. But I'm going to ask you about drainage. And I know
Mm-hmm.
this time of year, and also it won't be this way the whole season going forward. In fact, they're saying that even March will be warmer and drier. I heard the report from the University of Washington today. And I was thinking about your farm with it being flat beside this behemoth uh, construction that was going on. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall there being a very large hill there at times before going through that area, and
Mm-hmm.
wondered how that impacts your farm, how the drainage for that is being handled. And also, I was quite surprised at that kind of construction near a stream. So I wondered if you wanted to chime in on any of that. I mean, you must actually use some type of uh, what am I trying to say, watering system when we had the dry season before we had this long rain season. So the two combined, how you manage those two things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you bring up a nice point about the development too. I hadn't really honestly thought about that too much about the runoff from all the roofs and stuff because it's no longer will be just going directly into the soil. It'll be on impermeable surfaces, I think, as they call them. So that's something to think about too, definitely. I hope it doesn't affect us too bad. But yeah, and you mentioned that there is a stream and a culvert, or like I'm not sure the full like classification of the stream, but there is a water flow that runs through the various different properties and eventually drains out over into the Sammamish River into the slough. I know I was some organization. I think it's a collaboration between different governments, city governments, and maybe some other nonprofits, as other organizations as well that have activities along the Sammamish River. They all convened sometime last summer to talk about projects that could benefit the overall health and I think ecology of the river. So hopefully that coalition will come up with some solution. And I think they were already talking about like updating the culvert that is there. I'm sure I don't know too much about it. I'm sure the county manages it. But yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
hopefully there are some regulations that the developers have to abide by, but that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm not sure.
well, you do have the Washington State Conservation just down one half block from you, so it's surprising that
Mm,
that there hasn't been a lot of interest. But what about in terms of when you have the dry season, how
yeah.
do you do your watering? Do you have some type of a system in place?
We do, yeah. So it's actually it's unique story for this farm site in general. So I guess I'll preface this and sort of give a little bit more background about where we're at. We're located on a King County farm site. It's called the Sammamish River Farm by King County. And so in that we're not the only farmers on the land. We share. I'm not sure how big the total site is, maybe 10 or 15 acres, but in addition to us there, we're the newest tenant, I guess. All of the other farmers on the site are Hmong flower farmers that have been farming there in the same spot since I think since like the late 80s, early 90s. And for that time, it actually has been all dry farm. So there has been no irrigation available to any of the farmers there because the county doesn't have the water rights, I believe, to the to that land.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's wild. But and I'll say, I guess the soil is sort of suited to that dry. Well, I mean, dry. I'm not an expert on dry farming, so I won't say that the soil is suited to dry farming. But we do have I guess, a unique soil. It's really high in organic matter, and also I'm learning more and more about the history of the valley as well. But since it was like historically a wetland, and I think this Mammoth River used to be like a meandering river where in the whole valley it was pretty much all wetland areas. And then I believe in like the 40s the river was straightened and dredged by the Army Corps of Engineers, and so that drained a lot of the valley for development and for fields and for farmers to grow on. So anyway, that with that background, yeah, that is the background.
Well, thanks.
Um, and but yeah, up until 2020 is when I believe my boss first got the lease from King County there. And that year, maybe not that year, but I think in 2021, the county sort of saw that need. I was like really pushing for more food agriculture to be produced in King County, and so they were eventually able to negotiate for water rights to draw from the Sammamish River, to draw from the slough. I think I think that yeah, we were transferred. The county was transferred water rights from 60 acres park, I think, up in Redmond, the soccer fields, and maybe as well some of the turf farm. I'm not sure, but for the past few years, we have had ample access to irrigation water, thankfully, from the slough. I heard recently that it might not be happening this year, so that's something we're wondering about. Um, but yeah, that's the background on our irrigation. And the county put in a big header line for us to draw from the river. They have a pump that they provided as well, and a few lines of irrigation pipe and sprinklers, which has been very helpful. And we also, as Black Farmers Collective, sort of put in our own smaller system that we have a line of cisterns and water tanks that hold up to about 15,000 gallons, and we'll in the past few years we've run micro irrigation off of that, so just strip tape, mainly just strip tape. And yeah, that's
Thank
our
you.
irrigation situation.
Charlotte?
Rights. It's really difficult, isn't it, Rick?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Charlotte?
Yes. So so you mentioned that for your farm, you've got a couple of contracts, I think, with restaurants and that you distribute to some food banks. How about small axe farms? Do you have like agreements like with organizations or with commercial enterprises for the produce that you produce?
Yeah, a little bit of that as well. Yeah, sort of similar contracts with food banks with small acts, as well as we've done a few farmers markets in the past. This year we'll just be doing one. And hopefully, knock on wood, we'll also be starting a CSA this year for Small Axe Farm. That will be sourcing the produce from Small Axe as well as the other farmers that we have out there, that we're hosting as incubator farmers. And yeah, those will be our main outlets. Will be a farmers market, these food banks, and then a CSA. Hopefully, be the bulk of our market this year for Small Axe and Black Farmers Collective.
And and then I have one more question. Then, so the people that are working on the farm, obviously you're the farm manager, so you're an employee. Do you use a lot of volunteer labor, or is everybody there an employee?
We had Yeah, so I guess a small team. Mainly two people are out there this year. In the past, it's mainly just been me that's doing a lot of the work for Small Axe as well.
Okay.
We have a small nonprofit staff as well that we operate two farms as Black Farmers Collective, an urban farm here in Seattle, Yes Farm, and then Small Axe out there.
I see.
And
Okay.
for the past few years, it's been mainly just me out there with a few days of help with the rest of the staff there. This year it'll be me as well as I'll have a co-manager out there that will be tackling it together, as well as we'll have one hired farm crew.
Okay. All right. Busy days.
Yes, indeed.
Do have one question for you from Rapina. She asks, have you observed increased soil improvements and productivity using your farming practices over the past few years?
I would say just yes, I would. Do I have evidence to back that up? Not really, but yeah.
Observation.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say definitely the biggest thing I'd say is this the decrease in our main weed, which is reed canary grass. It's really an prolific, I was going to say invasive, but yeah, really prolific grass. It's also invasive. That just takes over fields and specifically wet soils, which our soil is very wet over the winter. And so yeah, it's been a few years of just gradually fighting that back and sort of knocking that population back of the reed canary grass. And yeah, and I'd say definitely we've observed and engaged in soil improvements, definitely adding a lot of compost as well as agricultural lime. I think this is something I'm learning about too, just learning more about the soil and specifically muck type soils, which is new to me. They're a lot waterlogged, and so I don't know too much if this is the cause of it, but we have a really low acidity as well, or maybe it's really acid. Anyway, it's like our pH is like around 4.6 before any other improvements we made, which is really low in my experience. but it may be characteristic for our soil types as well.
Well, you are on a river bottom, so
mm-hmm.
probably a lot of clay.
Yeah, I think it looks like Sandy has her hand up.
You're on mute,
I think
Sandy.
you're muted, Sandy. Sorry.
Oops. There you go.
Is that unmuted? No.
No, no.
Yes.
Yes, we can
Can
hear
you hear
you.
me now? Okay. So this might be a very naive question, but is there any way or possibility of working with the developers or contractors to capture some of that runoff that's going to be pavement runoff and store it or move it or whatever so that it can be used on the farm in the dry seasons?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that would be a big undertaking.
Yeah,
A
it
lot
would
of
be.
relationship building. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be kind of neat for the people there, the residents or
Mhm.
whatever, to be in kind of a harmonious sort of, you know, uh, partnership with the environment.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I hope.
Thanks, Masra. It was great.
Yes.
I want to give Jeremy a chance as well to chat with us. So do a quick introduction here. So Jeremy was born outside of Portland. He went to school and studied environmental science. At the age of 15, he worked on a small commercial flower farm in Idaho and also sold select vegetable crops like corn and peppers. And 2014, he had a job building log cabins that brought him to Seattle. And in 2015, he was hired by the Growing Things Farm in Carnation, one of the earliest vegetable farms in the valley. And then he worked there from 2016 to 28. He also had 2016 to 2018. He also had his own vegetable farm called Greenravenfarm, and where he sold vegetables at farmers markets. And then in 2019, he was hired by First Light Farm, and they're also in Carnation. They're responsible for everything that is growing on the farm, from selecting seeds to harvest to planting the farm's 4-season CSA, as well as the vegetables that are grown on the acres, the farm's 3-acre U-pick. He's also responsible for working with volunteers, offering educational classes on growing techniques through his Learn and Grow program, and any outreach to schools and organizations. So I've had the pleasure of getting to know Jeremy and First Light Farm over the past couple of years. So Jeremy, why don't you take the stand here and tell us about yourself?
So when I was little, throughout my childhood, I really wanted to become a farmer. It was my primary dream. And when I was a teenager, I ended up working for a farm in Idaho. And it was a struggling farm, a small farm, about the size of what First Light Farm is now, about 3 acres. And that farm really struggled economically, just making ends meet. And at that point, this is the early 90s, but I became disillusioned with the whole process. because it seemed like the only way that you could make money and make a living farming was if you had a large monoculture type of operation. And I switched interests at that point, and got into environmental science. I've always grown at some level or another, but when I was 35, I had a big life change, and at that same point in my life, I was doing a lot of activist work, and I wanted to further that in some way. And that was very general to social, to environmental issues primarily. But I wanted to do that. And one of the things that happened to me when I was a teenager is I grew up with tremendous amount of food insecurity. And that really has had an impact throughout my life. But I decided I wanted to learn farming so I could not only help out food banks and such services as that, but to teach people how to grow. And I just, by happenstance, came up to the Snoqualmie Valley to help a friend build a series of log cabins that had burned in a bad fire, rebuild them. And I got to know the valley, and I started getting to know the farm setup here. And I just waited for a point to where I could find work within that community and transition from what I was doing and learn just as much as I could possibly learn. And I got hired at Growing Things Farm, and it just so happens to be one of the oldest farms in the area, and the woman that owns it is beyond knowledgeable in vegetable production. It was amazing. It was quite the gift. She was a hard teacher, but I learned quite a bit. And after working there for a full year, I decided to start my own farm and still continue to work at Growing Things, just at a smaller level. And then I tried to branch out, and I did that for 3 years. Doing that by myself, it got very, very exhausting very quickly, especially working on top of owning and operating a farm. And after 3 years, I got to the point of physical and mental exhaustion. And I closed that farm. And during that same year, on the flip side of it, Jane hired me full-time at First Light Farm. And so I transitioned there, worked there for a few years, and then became the field manager. And at that point, I started really sharing my ideas with Jane about how I wanted to create an educational system out of what we were doing, and bring in people from the outside that weren't familiar with farming, and teach them, and do it as kind of a work share thing to where they 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 don't have to pay for my classes. They just have to donate the time that I give to the class. So everybody in that would be in the class, that is in the class, participates that equal time. And eventually I want to get First Light to the point where it's totally functional in that capacity. I want student programs to build the UPIC and then use the UPIC as a social engagement tool to get more people in the surrounding community interested in farming. So that's where I'm at now. This is my third year of teaching. So, yeah.
You seem to have a loyal set of customers who come out to the farm.
Yeah.
They really enjoy the UPIC aspect of it and interacting with the farm and the planning. Do you have any particular agricultural methods that you like to employ?
Yeah. So I live in a floodplain and I'm next to the Snoqualmie River, and that typically floods at least once a year. It can flood up to 8 times a year in my experience. Been through quite a few of them at this point. But that has an impact on infrastructure, and it also has an impact on the vegetables themselves, even if most things usually will live through a flood, but at that point they're contaminated and you can't like put them out on the market or anything like that. And you have to have your infrastructure set up to where you have to be able to reasonably be able to take down and move everything to high ground within 72 hours. The flood season happens between mid-October and early May. And so that has an impact on the soil and the soil health. We have areas that are really nice where the river puts a lot of sediment. And then we have areas where the river washes away all the soil and we're just left with hard clay. And so it really depends on the dynamics of the river, how I treat different segments of that land. If it's really bad clay, I've got this tool called Mantis, and it's like a rototiller, but it's more of a high-speed, smaller tool, and that really breaks down clay very well. I tarp and use landscape fabric. We have weed pressure, and some of that weed pressure just will never go away because it's morning glory and it's rhizome based. So we have to come up with strategies of dealing with that particular beast. I cover crop in the areas where the river washes away the soil. I do a lot of white clover, and that kind of just grips down everything. The roots of the clover grip everything down to where it keeps things from washing away. So let's see.
And that's perennial, right? Perennial white clover. What? That's perennial white clover.
Yeah. And then I just, when I use that land, I eventually till it back in. But the river also there's areas where the river deposits a lot of weed seeds, and I use mustard in those areas because the mustard will grow faster than the weeds. Shade them out, then you cut down you wait for the mustard to flower. You cut it down and you lay it on that same bed, and that additional element really helps with taking down the weeds. And I use fava, and I use buckwheat for adding benefits to the soil. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else I do. The U-pick, I do things more mechanical there. We have a John Deere tractor. We till once, we plow depending on the flood pressure that year. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. The more it floods, the more inclined I am to plow it that year, because more stuff is washed away in certain spots. But that's the U-pick. On an adjacent property, we have an area that we do most of the CSA stuff in, and I do a lot more tarping and broad forking, and even hand conditioning the soil over there. It's a smaller plot by far, maybe 1/8 of an acre. Like this time of year, I don't have anything mechanical right now. I just laid out arugula, turnips, and radishes, and I prep the beds with a broad fork and a triangular Warren hoe. If
your soil conditions don't really allow you to do no-till or anything like that where you are.
Not particularly. Next door, I can do more no-till. Yeah, actually, by our greenhouse, that's no-till outside of. If we get a really bad vole infestation, I'll go through. I'll bring the rototiller over and handle it that way. But I try and keep it, and in the greenhouse in particular, where it's nothing mechanical. And I do some broad forking next door as well. It depends on where I can get away with it and what the soil looks like. A couple of years ago, we had a really wet spring, and just in order to plant some stuff, I had to do some broad forking because it was just too wet to get any kind of machinery in there. I just had to break it up by hand. But yeah.
You mentioned that you have a 4-season CSA. Can you describe how you go about providing that all year round?
Yeah. That leads back to the greenhouse. I right now, I can do about 20 people through the whole season, and I've done up to 65 during the summer months. So the greenhouse adds quite a bit extra protection. It's a big greenhouse. It's like 30 by 80, if I remember correctly. And I fill it up in the fall, and depending on the crop, sometimes some things I'll even cover through the season. The flood water does go through there, But typically not bad. Usually it's about 8 inches, but there have been times where I've had like 3 feet of water go through it. But um, so let's see, how do I? So I use what I've planted in the fall through the winter and the early spring, along with storage vegetables like cabbage, carrots, garlic, winter squash. I start seeding mid-February, and that's what I described earlier. And I start plug trays this time of year too. And I do a lot of quick vegetables through this late winter and through the spring, like bok choy, Asian cabbages, lettuce. Let's see, the radishes, turnips, tatsoi, Japanese turnips. I try to just grow things that are ready under 30 days for that period of time, and then it just naturally progresses into what we start when we start our U-pick. That greenhouse and the land around it starts the CSA, and then once the U-pick gets planted, that becomes part of the CSA too, and that's when I can expand it up to a larger amount of people. Is there any more you'd like?
Any questions?
Mary has a question.
Yeah. So Jeremy, I was wondering, you mentioned the classes that you do. Do you have any classes for youth or children, teaching them about growing and planting, care for the soil, those kinds of things?
Yeah, we want to incorporate youth projects into the farm. With children, I would like to find somebody that could accommodate that situation. I'm just really awkward around kids.
So about how young do your class are you comfortable with people in your classes?
14.
Okay.
In fact, we have a 14-year-old signed up this year.
Oh, so that's a great age. Yes, yeah, so they can do lots of stuff. Wonderful. Thank you. Do you mind if we share that information?
Yeah, please. We have openings,
okay.
And I'd really love to fill them.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about what or is it on a website that we could go to that?
Yeah, the Learn and Grow program is advertised on the First Light Farm website, which if you put U-pick Seattle into Google, it's the first hit. If you try and put First Light Farm in, you'll get like 30 different farms from around the country.
Okay. If not, I can ask Jane, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Jeremy.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Rick.
Is it my understanding, Jeremy, that you said that with the educational program, there's no charge to the learner, but it's an hour for an hour service on the farm? Is that the way I understood that?
Yeah, exactly.
And when are those programs held? What days of the week, which hours?
They're held on Sunday afternoons. The volunteer, and that happens twice a month. And then the volunteer time happens twice a month. So you'd come every Sunday for 4 hours of learning, and then following it that following week with 4 hours of field work.
And that starts when and ends when, in terms of the months?
First Sunday of May, and it goes to the beginning of September.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I have a question about SNAP. So are you still doing that this year, the SNAP?
I do believe that we're doing SNAP again this year. We didn't have a lot of engagement with it last year, which was our first year of doing it, but we don't have it really advertised anywhere, and I think we need to focus on that to bring
Yeah,
out.
can people do CSA boxes with the SNAP, or they need to come to the farm, which may be, difficult for some people?
We do have some pickup spots, one in Carnation and one in Seattle in the Greenwood area. Doing a CSA box would be tricky, but I think it would really be doable. I would have to talk to Jane about it. It would just be a different formula of how we handled it. I would believe that instead of one lump sum, it'd be like something small monthly. That would be the one difference.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Donna.
Jeremy, would you tell us the different farms, oh, what, it just went out of my head, where you go and you have a booth where you're actually having produce available outside of the CSA. What are the different ones in the area that you service?
Farmer market.
Farmers market. Thank you. My brain.
Yeah, we try to avoid doing farmers markets, and so far we've been successful. It's such a counterintuitive vibe to where we are in the farming world. It's a very competitive environment, very much sell kind of vibe to it, and it's very exhausting. You spend a full day before the market, just getting ready for the market, and then you do the market, and it's a large time sink. I mean, you can make money doing it, but it's a very exhausting system to get involved with when you're already at full capacity with what you do with your labor.
Now, you do younger children's courses, because I know Jane did a worm farm course for younger students. So in some respects, the First Light Farm, you and Jane are actually prepping farmers to be, hopefully.
Yeah, totally. We have done some events like that in the past, for sure. But to really get serious about it, I feel like we would need to bring somebody on. What I'd really love to find is somebody who has a background with children that also wants to be a laborer and kind of just have both of those aspects to their job. I don't know. We've talked to a few people in the past, but I mean, we're hopeful. It's not anything that we're opposed to having.
Yeah, one of the questions that I had, this is for both Masra and Jeremy, is notoriously as we look throughout history, not just in America but also in other parts of the world, that many times people shy away from farming because it's so difficult to make it, to survive from that practice. What do we see as we look at building community and supporting community? What do we see as some of the things that need to happen for it to be sustainable for those who are farmers? Either a change in perspective or what people are willing to pay for produce. What are the aspects? What are the aspects that you feel are things that community needs to become aware of to make it a profession that people who love this can also survive doing it?
I think we need to think outside of the box as far as of different models. One train of thought that I often touch upon is what happened with farmers during the Great Depression. And we lost a lot of independent farmers during that period of America. But there were farms that made it, and they made it by helping each other out. And I would just like to see a return to that type of model, along with more of a outside community involvement as well. I don't know what that looks like, but I don't know. I just see that we need to find a new model or new models of interacting with agriculture as far as the community aspect goes.
Yeah, I would agree with much what Jeremy had to say there. I think it's a large issue, to say the least, and definitely multifaceted. But I think, yeah, that larger community engagement with people who aren't typically involved with farming or know a lot about the food system, as well as, yeah, all the things that you might have mentioned. Brick too is just sort of people changing their values on how they view food, how they view the food system, and really getting that connection with farmers. I think building that urban rural connection. I think connecting the bulk of the population to the communities that produce food, and really putting a face to it. That is, and unfortunately, that's also seemingly going the other way on terms of like large scale agricultural systems. I think we're seeing more and more consolidation of the huge mega farms and the big corporations that are sort of steering the industrial food system one way towards that consolidation. But yeah, I don't know if I definitely don't have any of the answers, but I think it's a huge multifaceted issue that will take a lot of grassroots and a lot of, I think, policy changes as well. I think, yeah, multi-pronged way of approaching it in terms of people getting connected with farmers, as well as people through that connection being able to advocate for larger scale political policy changes as well that really reinforce the small farmer, I guess, to put it broadly. And yeah, sort of, I'd say breaking down some barriers for farmers and producers to access whether it be USDA programs, funding programs as well. And yeah, sort of shifting that consciousness around the food system to say it long and perhaps not making too much sense, but yeah, I don't know if that made any sense, but there's that.
Thank you.
Here's one question for you, Masra, in the chat from Jasmine. She said she assumes your passion of agroecology practices, you won't be using tilling methods at Coyote Run Farm, but just to clarify, is your method of cutting a hole in the ground and then dropping a seed an alternative method?
Yeah. I was able to respond to Jasmine in the chat personally,
okay,
but
sorry.
yeah, I can answer it. Just clarifies. I will be probably using some, not probably, I'll definitely be using some tilling for Coyote Run Farm as well. So not going to be no till there. We'll use, I mean, we'll use tilling consciously and use it only when needed, and using some, I guess, less intensive forms of tilling as opposed to a rototiller. We have a attachment called a power harrow, which is tilling, but it's instead of like inverting some of the soil layers like a rototiller does, it sort of just stirs the top layer, not the top, but stirs the layers and mixes up soil to get a good aggregation that way. But and for the cutting and burning holes, I was talking about using landscape fabric, which is a woven type of polypropylene fabric that is used in landscaping product situations, as the name goes. But I'll put that over a bed, and then I'll cut or burn whatever plant spacing pattern I'll need in that bed, and then I'll just come and put individual transplants into those holes. So that'll cover the bed and reduce any weeding necessary. And yeah, still have place for the plants to get into the ground. But yes.
I suppose that also helps warm the soil. It's generally
Yeah,
black, right?
definitely. Yep. Yeah, black fabric and yeah.
And it's water permeable.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the stuff that I use, yeah, would be semi-permeable, I think.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many specific questions. I may not even make sense. But it just seems to me that there is an increasing awareness of the need in some areas, although I think money and, being affordability is a big factor of increasingly people are looking at food a little more critically, I think, and the quality of food and um, but then, I'm talking about large agriculture. I was just thinking about this proposed merger, where who is it? Kroger wants to buy every grocery store in the country. They want to sort of have it sounds like mega farms are sort of in that same category where they're just monopolizing the market. But on the other hand, maybe it's just living out in the valley and being associated with, First Light Farm and some of the local farms here. But it seems like there is an increasing awareness on the part of a lot of people and a real demand for quality food and a concern for the way food is grown too in terms of the environment. So I think what y'all are doing is, you're doing outreach, you're opening up, you're farming to other people and educating people. And it just seems that it's a slow process, but I think you have to kind of keep your eye on the prize and realize it's, it's like building a wall one brick at a time, but you make progress if you keep at it. I guess you just have to have the support. I'm wondering how you can maintain that support and, get people to really hang in there with you to,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, those are just kind of comments, but we've got two opposing things. Like David and Goliath in a way.
Yeah, on one hand, it seems as though there has been a certain amount, I'm not sure if it's postage stamp or not, from the county to support farmers. And on the other hand, it seems it's opposing the support of the small farmer. Uh, and I don't know how much, one, Jeremy already mentioned there's not a lot of the coalition in the Snoqualmie Valley. I'm not sure if it's always been that way because I'm not from here. But the fact that you have a coalition there in Seattle with your group of farmers, Masra, um, seems hopeful. But even the store PCC, which many of us patronize because of the quality of food and the co-opness of it, although it is one of those things you have to be a member, so you have to afford to be a member to be able to go there. That has its own blockage for many, but even they're struggling. So in terms of your own people you speak with, how are you perceiving your future? Either one, or both of you.
Yeah. I would say something that what Donna you were saying brings up for me, and Charlotte, what you were saying earlier, leads me to amend my statement on, I guess, the big question that Rick asked is a big and a big thing that we're seeing a lot, specifically with like Black farmers, and BIPOC farmers and historically underserved farmers, is really the, I guess, the behemoth of the thing we face is sort of access to land, really, and those resources, because specifically here in like King County, specifically, and I'd say Washington and Western Washington in general, land is just getting more and more expensive and more inaccessible to people who don't have that historical capital or that historical background of having inheritances and lots of capital to invest or to put into land, to even find land. Yeah. And so that's just another thing on the top of the increasingly consolidated food system that we face. And that's a major thing that we're hearing from my work in Black Farmers Collective is all the farmers we work with, they're either leasing land or somehow have gotten to just in a good relationship with someone to use the land that they're using, or it's through county programs like through King County that will be the only way that any of us would really be able to start farming. So yeah, that's a big one, if probably the biggest, but I digress.
When I speak with people throughout different areas, I'm on a call once a month where people from all over the world communicate with regards to what they're doing in agriculture. And what I find a lot of folks trying to do is to create value added products out of their agricultural products. And I don't know how feasible that is in every area, or how much input, uh, how long does it take to make that pay off. For example, I think I'd share with you in our conversation that we had, Masra, earlier, that I met someone this weekend on a call who is from Africa, and they work with a collective of farmers who produce different seeds, and they cold press sesame seeds and avocado seeds and flax seed and these different seeds into an oil. Also, they make shea butter and things of this nature out of the pressing of seeds. And so I don't know how how much this would work across across systems and across geography, and how much input needs to be created in terms of an investment. Like I know it costs a lot of money to have a cold press machine that's going to be used commercially, right? So what kind of investment needs to go in to gain the value out of the growing and the processing of agricultural products?
Yeah, I'd be interested, Rick, in knowing the kind of support those people had to get that equipment. That was the point I was asking for Jeremy and Masra to speak to, um, and how the normal person, myself included, would be able to be supportive, to know that how much of my taxes that I pay actually go to support farmers to have this kind of equipment. I had an experience living in North Carolina where that is a huge industrial, I realize, a good portion of industrial farming, but also a good portion equally with small farmers. And they're very supportive in that state of their farmers, both types, and also have a whole industry to help the farmers do exactly what you're saying, Rick, that to help them produce something that they have in their small acreage that makes a difference in the economy and to the sustainability of the farmer. Why we don't have something like that here, I'm not sure. I'm groping for it. I'm asking if any of you know it. Are we so independent here as farmers that we're exhausted as farmers that we just can't put that kind of pressure on our state to be able to support the all types of farmers. I've heard a few of these podcasts that have been done on the news, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of support. That they've not felt it. So hopefully, if you come up with something, let us know so we can support you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are a few of those programs here in our state, and we just got a grant from the WSDA. And yeah, I'm not too knowledgeable about all the programs, but there's some, I would say. And just for individuals, I mean, I'll happily take any money as well. So that's the big one, capital, especially for new and starting farmers like myself. But yeah, I know King County has a few programs as well. A number of farmers and other organizations we're working with are applying for this. There's a big conservation futures grant or trust that I think is a tax in King County that a portion of the money goes to this organization, which then grants money to organizations that are seeking to purchase land to put into. I think mainly it was geared towards like parks and just outdoor spaces and green spaces for people to recreate on. But in the past few years, they've expanded that out to more looking at farms for that stuff.
So I know there's one thing that on this theme that this is that some of us are newly have newly become aware of, and that's to support and lobby, actually advocate for classes in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, about the advantages of sustainable farming on a local level that's healthy soil, healthy families. And if we learn these things as families grow and our children going through schools, it helps to create programs when they become part of the workforce. So I know that that's something that we've recently become aware of and that we're going to investigate. as a help to the farmers, and to further the knowledge of why it's to our advantage to have local farmers growing sustainable crops without a lot of pesticides and herbicides and all that. So I love this question, and thank you, however it started, maybe with Rick, but I thank you for the question and the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you, Masra and Jeremy, for joining us and for sharing so liberally with your knowledge and your experience. And we really are happy that you take the time to share this with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, likewise.
So contact information.
Yes. I can drop my email and stuff in the chat if folks, or pass it on to any organizer. I don't know who has all the emails.
That would be great, Masra. And if you don't mind, I would send it out to the distribution list that I used to invite everyone here.
Yeah, not at all.
Perfect.
You want me to do it in the chat, or you already have it, so you can pass it
Well,
along?
I have your email address. If you want to add anything there, like phone number or address, you're welcome to. Or I can just send out the your email address.
Yeah, email would be good. People can just get in touch that way.
Same for you, Jeremy. If there's any information you'd like to share with people, it's not a problem to just distribute it.
Just what?
It wouldn't be a problem to distribute your contact information if you wanted to share it.
Okay. My personal email is greenravenfarm@gmail.
Yeah, if you could just drop that in the chat, that would be great.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's spelled green, Green, Raven, Raven at Gmail.
greenravenfarm at
Green
Gmail.
Raven Farm at Gmail.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and Jeremy, we've known that farm name for a long time, and we've emailed you a long time, and now we know who you are. You're too busy out there in the field. Anyway, this has been fun. Thank you so much. I'm really happy that we got to meet you, Masra, and we got Jeremy on camera.
Jeremy's cat. I'd like to know about your cat. He looks like
I'm cat sitting right now, actually.
Oh.
She just hopped up here.
So here's a message from Andrew Rappin, who is a teacher of environmental science at Mount Si High School. And he says, thank you both for your time, consideration, and commitment to sustainable agriculture.
Yes.
That's true. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yay, there's Jane, the other Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
This is Jane at First Light Farm, Masra, if you haven't met her.
I haven't. No. Hello.
We should do a field trip to your farm, and you should do a field trip to First Light Farm.
Yeah, no, I'd love to.
Yes, yeah. And then you just go up the street from First Light Farm and get to visit Rick's little farm.
Oh, yeah. Furnishing.
It would be great to see us all together. So hopefully this summer, if we have an activity, you'll join us, Masra, and bring your family and your friends and anyone who wants to come to the country further away from the city.
Definitely. It's not too far. It's only like 15 minutes from my farm, I think.
Yeah, we found you.
Yep.
It was quite an adventure, and I can see how we had difficulty because the street disappeared due to that construction.
Yeah, I think it's unmarked in general too. It's just I had trouble finding it when I first got there too. But
well, you might have lots of volunteer help. I mean, there's a lot of people who are going to live there, So you would have hopefully young people to bring on up, as well as those who want to get their hands in the soil.
Yeah,
And when
I'm
you talk about
excited.
human power, I've got to tell you that I had a big wheel, and I did my little plot farming with a big wheel that had all the attachments to it. So I guess you call that no-till farming. And did a wonderful job with weed control with seaweed. Works wonders.
Nice. That's nice.
Good night, everyone.
Oh,
Good night, Rick.
good
Thank you
night.
so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nicole. Great job.
See you, Marianne.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye. Happy
Bye,
spring.
Masra. Bye,
Bye.
Jeremy.
Happy cat sitting.
Thank you, Jane. And